A veteran inherits a mountain cabin. But what his dog finds hidden inside shakes the entire town. The snow came down in slow, heavy sheets, the kind that made the world feel muted and far away. Cole Henderson watched the white drift across the windshield as his old truck crawled up the mountain road toward Silver Creek, Colorado. The wipers scraped in a tired rhythm. Beside him, Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, ears sharp, chest rising and falling in steady control. The German shepherd barely blinked, as if he too sensed they were climbing toward something that wasn't just a town on a map. Cole had received the letter only 3 days earlier. A lawyer from Silver Creek informed him that his uncle, a man he had never met, barely even heard about, had left him a cabin tucked against the northern slope of the Rockies. No explanation, no instructions, just a signature and a set of keys. It felt like a joke at first, or a mistake. But after Afghanistan, after losing half his platoon and the pieces of himself he still couldn't articulate, Cole had nothing to lose by driving into a place strangers insisted was now his. By the time he reached the last turn, night had already taken the forest. The headlights sliced through the pines, throwing long shadows that looked like figures reaching across the snow. The cabin appeared suddenly, a dark outline pressed against the hillside. Weathered logs, a sagging porch, a single lantern flickering by the door as if someone had lit it minutes before he arrived. Cole cut the engine. Silence folded over the world so completely he felt it in his chest. Ranger hopped down first, nose lifted into the icy air. His breath steamed into the darkness. Cole followed, boots sinking into untouched snow. A cold wind rushed down from the ridge, brushing past his face like a whisper. The lawyer had warned him the place was old. But Cole hadn't expected it to feel abandoned in a way that almost felt personal, like the cabin had been holding its breath for years. He unlocked the door. Hinges groaned. The inside smelled of dust, pine, and a faint trace of pipe smoke that shouldn't have lingered after decades. Cole stepped in, dropped his duffel by the wall, and let the quiet settle around him. Ranger stayed by the threshold longer than usual. The dog scanned the room, posture tense, eyes narrowing as if mapping every corner. "What is it, buddy?" Cole asked. Ranger didn't move. His ears pulled forward, then flattened. The soft rumble in his chest wasn't directed at the darkness. It was directed at something beneath them. Cole shook off the unease. PTSD had sharpened his imagination into something that didn't always belong to reality. He forced himself to breathe normally, unpack a few things, and start the old cast-iron stove. But Ranger didn't relax. He paced the room, nails clicking against the wooden floor. Then he froze near the far wall, nose pressed against a knot in the floorboards. He let out a low, insistent growl. Cole straightened. Ranger never acted without reason. He walked over and knelt beside the dog. The floorboards here were colder than the rest. A faint draft seeped through the cracks. Cole pushed lightly with his fingers. The wood shifted. A hollow sound echoed back, a hidden compartment. But before he could pry it open, a sharp knock exploded against the front door. Cole jerked to his feet. Ranger spun around and sprang forward, placing himself between Cole and the entrance. His growl deepened, protective now, not curious. Someone was out there, on a mountain road no one used at night, in a storm that hid footstep and intention alike. Cole reached for the old shotgun resting above the fireplace. He hadn't planned on using it, but instinct rose quick and clean the way it had in combat zones. Ranger edged closer to the door, hackles raised, gaze unblinking. "Who's there?" Cole called. No answer. Only wind. He stepped closer, shotgun at his side. Ranger's body stiffened. The dog saw something Cole didn't. Another knock. This one slower, softer, as if someone was feeling their way through the wood. Cole eased the door open an inch. Snow gusted in. and through the haze of white he saw a figure standing just beyond the porch light. Tall. Still. Wearing a jacket far too thin for the weather. The man's face was half hidden by snow and shadow, but his voice was clear. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "The cabin, it should have stayed closed." Before Cole could speak, the man backed away, disappearing into the trees without a footprint left behind, as though the snow swallowed him whole. Cole stepped outside, scanning the tree line. Nothing but wind and darkness. When he returned inside, Ranger was back at the floorboard, paws planted firmly, waiting. Cole exhaled sharply. The town didn't want him here. A stranger knew exactly when he arrived. And the cabin, this inheritance from a man he never knew, was hiding something deep beneath the wood. Cole knelt beside Ranger again. "All right," he murmured. "Show me what you found." Ranger pressed his nose against the board, and with a reluctant snap, the floor gave way. A cold draft rose from the darkness below. The air smelled of metal, paper, and something older, something that had waited a long time to be found. Cole stared into the black opening. Ranger leaned forward, ears forward, eyes steady. Whatever lay beneath the cabin had been buried for decades, and now it had chosen tonight, the first night he ever stepped foot in Silver Creek, to call them both down into its secrets. The next morning arrived without color. A pale light pushed through the frosted windows, turning the cabin into a dull blur of gray and cold breath. Cole hadn't slept. He'd sat in the old wooden chair with the shotgun resting across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark hole in the floor until the horizon softened. Ranger stayed pressed, against his leg the whole night, alert but calm, as if he knew the only way Cole would make it through was if he had something solid to lean on. Cole finally stood and rubbed his face with both hands. Sleep hadn't touched him much in the years since Afghanistan, but last night had brought back a different kind of insomnia. The kind where shadows whispered and memories pressed against the edges of perception. Ranger nudged his knee gently, grounding him back in the present. "Yeah," Cole muttered. "I'm all right." He wasn't. Ranger knew it. They sealed the opening for now, placing a heavy trunk over the floorboard. Cole didn't want anyone from the outside stumbling onto it, especially not the stranger from the night before. He still wasn't sure if the man was real or a hallucination from a tired, traumatized mind. But Ranger had reacted, and Ranger didn't lie. Cole stepped outside into the crisp mountain air. The snow had stopped, leaving Silver Creek blanketed in untouched white. Smoke curled from chimneys across the valley. He could hear the distant echo of an axe hitting wood. For a place that looked peaceful from the outside, the silence carried a weight he couldn't explain. Ranger walked at his side as they headed toward town. Cole needed supplies, and maybe answers. Silver Creek was small, the kind of mountain town where everyone noticed when a new truck showed up. Cole felt eyes on him the moment he stepped into the general store. Ranger padded in beside him, with the confidence of an officer entering a briefing room. The dog moved slow, scanning, reading the room before Cole even had to. A few locals nodded politely, but their curiosity was sharp. A young cashier whispered something to an older man stocking shelves. Two women by the coffee thermos stopped mid-conversation. Everyone was civil, but cautious, as if they expected Cole to bring trouble with him. Laura McKinley, the store owner, greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be the Henderson nephew," she said. "Word travels fast around here." "Seems like it," Cole replied. Ranger sat beside him, tail still, eyes studying her. "You settling in?" "Trying to." She hesitated. "That cabin, it holds a lot of history." Cole waited for her to say more, but she didn't. Her gaze drifted to Ranger instead. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "He's the reason I'm still around," Cole answered truthfully. Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Sheriff Marcus Dean stepped inside. The room stiffened. Dean walked with the slow certainty of a man used to being in charge. Broad shoulders, trimmed beard, eyes cold like river rocks. He clocked Ranger first, then Cole, and his expression shuttered into something unreadable. "So you're the nephew," Dean said, voice flat. "That's what the paperwork says," Cole replied. Ranger shifted closer to Cole's leg. His ears tipped forward. He wasn't growling, but there was tension in his stance, the kind Cole had learned to trust. Dean looked at the dog, then back at Cole. "Mountain's rough this time of year. People usually don't last long in that cabin. Good thing I've lived through worse." Dean smiled without warmth. "Still, strange thing, your uncle passing without notice. Man kept to himself, but he never left business unfinished." "Did you know him?" Cole asked. Dean paused just long enough to raise suspicion. Everyone knew him. Town this small, secrets don't stay hidden. Another half-truth. Cole could feel it. Before anything else could be said, Ranger took a step forward and sniffed the air. His posture sharpened, eyes fixed on the sheriff like he'd caught a scent he didn't like. Dean watched the dog back, jaw tightening. "Keep him close," he said. "This place has wildlife that won't hesitate to tear something apart." Ranger bristled. Not at the warning. At the tone. Dean left without buying anything. Cole exhaled slowly. "That guy always like that?" Laura lowered her voice. "Sheriff Dean. He's complicated. His father ran things here decades before him. Old family, old expectations." "And the cabin?" Her eyes flickered. "Some things in this town are better left alone." Cole leaned on the counter. "Last night someone came by, knocked on my door, told me I shouldn't be here." Laura went completely still. She didn't ask who. She didn't pretend to be surprised. She only whispered, "Be careful who you trust." Ranger nudged Cole's hand, urging him out. On the walk back up the mountain road, Cole's thoughts tangled. The sheriff's reaction, Laura's warning, the stranger's words, and Ranger's instinct, sharper than anything Cole could piece together. Halfway up the trail, Ranger stopped abruptly. He stared into the trees, muscles locked. Then he darted forward, dragging Cole several steps before stopping on the edge of a ravine where the snow thinned against exposed roots. Something metallic glinted under a half-buried rock. Cole knelt and brushed the snow away. It was a badge. Old, rusted, cracked down the center. A police badge from Silver Creek, dated 1971. Ranger backed up, pacing anxiously, as if sensing the memory trapped inside the metal. Cole turned the badge over and noticed the initials carved on the back. H.D., his uncle's initials. Except his uncle had never been a cop. At least that was what Cole had always been told. A fresh gust of wind howled through the trees, carrying a faint echo of something else. Not quite a voice. More like the memory of one. Ranger pressed close, watching him, urging him to understand. The cabin wasn't just inheritance, it was unfinished business. And the town wasn't afraid of Cole, it was afraid of what Ranger had already started to uncover. The storm returned that night, rolling down from the ridge like a slow-moving avalanche of wind and white. The cabin creaked under each gust. Cole sat at the table, staring at the rusted badge he and Ranger had found earlier. His uncle's initials burned in his mind. H.D., a coincidence maybe, but Ranger hadn't treated it like one. The dog lay near the fire, head up, eyes fixed on Cole as if waiting for him to connect dots he couldn't yet see. "You knew something was off the second we got here," Cole whispered. Ranger lifted his head higher. Cole stood and paced the room. Every step he took made the floorboards groan in uneven tones. A high pitch near the window, a hollow one near the bed, and then another sound. Lower, deeper, right beneath the table. Ranger was already moving toward it. Before Cole could react, the shepherd dug his paws against the wood, claws hooking the edges of an old board. He scraped hard. The rhythmic thud of paw against plank echoed like a heartbeat through the cabin. "Ranger, what is it?" The dog ignored him, driven by instinct that had saved lives long before this mountain ever came into the picture. He wedged his muzzle against the board, snorted at the dust, then bit down and pulled until the wood snapped free and skidded across the room. Cole knelt quickly. Beneath the splintered plank was a narrow cavity filled with tightly packed dirt. Ranger pushed past him, digging hard until his paws hit metal. Cole brushed the soil aside and uncovered a tin box, edges rusted, lid sealed with a melted line of solder. Faded letters marked the top, 1971. His breath caught. Why would a man he barely knew hide something so carefully for 50 years? And why leave the cabin to a nephew he'd never spoken to? Ranger circled the box, tail stiff, gaze intense. Not fearful, expectant. Cole carried the tin to the table. He hesitated, hands hovering above the lid. Ranger let out a quick huff, as if telling him to stop overthinking. "All right." He pried the lid open with a screwdriver. The seal cracked with a muffled pop, and a cloud of old air drifted out, smelling faintly of tobacco and damp earth. Inside were 3 items. The first was a folded map. Yellowed, edges fragile. When Cole opened it, he saw the surrounding forest drawn in thick charcoal lines. Trails crossed out, a circle inked around a specific ridge north of Silver Creek. Scribbled notes along the margins, coordinates, dates, and one phrase, last known point. Cole felt a pulse of cold move through him. The second item was a broken fragment of a police badge, the same engraving style as the one found under the ravine root, except this one had a jagged crack running through the edge, and on the back were the letters, Ardeen. Ranger growled low, ears flattening. Cole set the fragment down. The sheriff's father had been the police chief in the 70s. Was this his badge? Why was it buried under his uncle's floor? He reached for the final object. A cassette tape, rusted along the edges, the label smeared but still legible enough to read the word. Testimony. Ranger nudged his hand, urging him to continue. Cole found an old cassette player in a drawer, dust-covered but intact. He wiped it off, inserted the tape, and pressed play. At first only static filled the room. Then a crackling voice broke through. "This is Harold Douglas. If someone finds this, then the truth didn't make it out alive." Cole froze. Ranger stood completely still. The voice continued, trembling, breathless. "Chief Raymond Dean is involved. Evidence buried, witness missing. They'll come for me next." Ranger let out a soft bark, not loud, but sharp, like he understood the weight of what they were hearing. The tape clicked, jammed, then started again. "If you're listening, stay away from the ridge. Stay away from Silver Creek. They won't let the past stay dead." Then it cut off. The room fell silent. Cole stared at the player, the words sinking through him like stones in deep water. His uncle hadn't just left him a cabin. He had left him a message, a warning, a responsibility, and maybe a death sentence. Thunder cracked outside. Ranger's ears snapped towards the door. A second later, someone knocked. Unlike last night's eerie tap, this knock was hard, heavy, authority demanding entry. Cole quickly swept the tape, the map, and the badge fragment back into the tin and slid it beneath the loose board. Ranger positioned himself between the door and Cole, muscles taut. "Hold on," Cole whispered. He opened the door a few inches. Sheriff Marcus Dean stood on the porch, snow catching in his beard, eyes colder than the mountain air. "Evening," the sheriff said. "Mind if I come in?" Ranger growled. Dean's eyes flicked to the dog. "Control him." "He's fine," Cole replied. Dean's jaw tightened. We got reports someone was seen hiking near your cabin last night. Figured I should check in. Make sure you're safe. Cole leaned against the frame. You seem real concerned for someone who barely knows me. Dean's eyes narrowed at the implication. For a brief moment, something sharp flickered behind them. Fear, or guilt, or recognition. Your uncle kept secrets, Dean said slowly. Secrets cause trouble. Don't dig around in his mountain eats curious men. Ranger took one step forward, teeth visible. Dean stepped back sharply, hand moving instinctively toward his holster. Get your dog in check, Henderson. Cole didn't move. Ranger checks people before I do. He doesn't like you. Dean stared at him for a long, dangerous second. Then he turned and walked into the storm without another word. When the sheriff disappeared into the darkness, Cole shut the door and turned to Ranger. You knew, Cole whispered. Before I even touched that floorboard, you knew. Ranger pressed his head into Cole's chest, grounding him, steadying the room that suddenly felt too small for all the truths buried beneath it. Cole rested a hand on Ranger's back. What did my uncle get himself into? He murmured, and why leave it for us to find? The dog didn't answer, but his steady presence was enough to push Cole towards the only conclusion that made sense. The cabin wasn't a home. It was a crime scene. And Ranger had just found the first piece of a story the entire town had tried to forget. The next morning, the storm had eased, but left Silver Creek buried under a clean, blinding sheet of white. Cole walked down Main Street with the map folded tightly inside his jacket, Ranger trotting beside him with ears high and alert. The town looked peaceful on the surface, but the way people glanced at Cole told a different story. Conversations paused as he passed. Doors closed faster than they needed to. Even the wind seemed softer here, as if afraid to disturb something long buried. Cole stepped into McKinley's general store, a small wooden building with a sagging porch and windows fogged from the wood stove inside. A bell jingled overhead. Laura McKinley stood behind the counter, sorting cans with the same measured calm of someone who'd survived more winters than she cared to count. She offered a polite smile. Morning. New face in town means you must be Henderson. Word travels fast. In a place like this, it outruns the wind. Ranger sniffed the air, then sat near Cole's leg, gaze fixed on Laura, watching for something even Cole couldn't define. Cole unfolded the map and placed it gently on the counter. The paper trembled from age, or maybe from the cold in his hands. Ever seen anything like this? Looks hand-drawn. Laura froze. For 1 second, just one, the entire store seemed to still with her. Her eyes flicked over the map, then quickly away, as if the lines themselves burned. I can't help you, Cole. You didn't even look. I looked enough. Her voice lowered. You should put that away. Some things in Silver Creek aren't meant to be stirred up. Why? What happened on that ridge? Laura hesitated, leaning closer so no one outside could hear. The man who owned your cabin before you. Harold Douglas. He wasn't the only one who vanished. There were 3 disappearances tied to that ridge, all during snowstorms, all unsolved. Cole's chest tightened. Sheriff Dean ever investigate? Laura's jaw tensed. Back then his father was sheriff, and his word ended every search early. Too early, if you ask people who still remember. Cole tried to press further, but Laura gently slid the map back toward him. Listen to me. Harold was a quiet man, but he wasn't crazy. The night he disappeared, I heard him hammering something under his floorboards. The next morning, he was gone. And when the snow cleared, half the town pretended it never happened. Ranger growled softly. Laura glanced down. Your dog knows I'm telling the truth. Shepherds always do. Cole folded the map, thanked her, and left the store with more questions than answers. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Ranger tugged forward sharply. nose to the ground, pulling Cole back toward the line of cabins at the edge of the forest. "You want to go back already?" Cole asked. Ranger looked up with a stare that wasn't just instinct. It was certainty. They reached the cabin by midday. The sky darkened fast, the kind of sudden shift only the Rockies could produce. Cole closed the door behind him when Ranger suddenly stiffened, nose pointed toward the far corner. "What is it this time?" Ranger padded across the room, stopped near the old wood stove, and scraped his paw against the floor. Then he let out one sharp bark. Cole grabbed a flashlight and knelt beside him. The floorboard here didn't sound hollow like before. Instead, the wall behind the stove caught his attention, an uneven patch of stone that didn't match the rest. He ran his fingers along it. Loose. Ranger pressed his weight into the base of the wall. The stones shifted, then collapsed inward, revealing a narrow wooden tunnel slanting down into darkness. Cole's breath hitched. "There's a passage under the cabin." Ranger didn't wait. He stepped forward, muscles tight with readiness, but not fear. Cole switched on the flashlight. Dust motes spiraled through the beam like falling ash. Cold air seeped up from below, carrying the faint scent of pine roots and something metallic. Old, forgotten. Cole whispered. No wonder he hid the tape. He ducked inside, Ranger following closely. The tunnel wasn't tall enough to stand upright. Wooden beams reinforced the sides, though many had splintered. Someone built this long ago, intentionally. A passage that led deeper into the earth, a place no one would find unless an animal with perfect instincts uncovered it. The farther they walked, the colder the air grew. And then the tunnel widened into a small chamber carved into the bedrock. Ranger stopped abruptly, tail frozen mid-sway, staring at the back wall. Cole lifted the light. Scratches, deep, frantic gouges torn into the stone, and painted letters, faded but unmistakable. "Do not trust the Deans." Cole stepped back, pulse pounding. Ranger growled low, the closest thing to fear Cole had ever heard from him. The message looked decades old. A second message lay beneath it, carved with a trembling hand. They silenced him. I heard it through the floor. Cole swallowed hard. Someone had listened through the wood above. Someone had known Harold might be taken. Ranger suddenly turned his head sharply towards the chamber entrance. His ears pricked. His body locked into alert mode. "Someone's outside," Cole whispered. Snow crunched above them. Slow, deliberate. Right over the cabin floor. Cole killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the chamber, but Ranger stayed pressed against him, silent, steady. A shadow moved above, a shift of weight, the unmistakable creak of a man stepping inside the cabin. Cole held his breath. Moment later, the footsteps retreated. The front door shut. Ranger didn't relax until another full minute passed. Cole whispered, "They know we're digging." He looked around the chamber again, at the carvings on the wall, at the evidence of fear preserved in stone. "Whoever walked in here tonight," he murmured, "was looking for this place." Ranger pressed his forehead to Cole's leg, as if urging him forward, not backward, as if the truth wasn't something to hide from anymore. Cole steadied his breath. The mountain wasn't just holding secrets, it was pushing him toward them. And Ranger was the only reason those secrets were finally waking up. Cole waited until nightfall before returning to the hidden tunnel beneath the cabin. The storm outside was thick enough to hide footprints, and that was the only cover he trusted. Ranger stayed close, scanning every shift of wind, every groan in the wood above them. Cole swept the flashlight over the stone carvings one more time, then followed the tunnel deeper. The farther they went, the more the air changed, less like damp soil, more like stale metal. The passage sloped down sharply until the wooden beams gave way to steel. A door waited at the bottom. Thick, reinforced. Government issue, Cold War era. Cole pressed his palm against it. It slid open with a long, grinding scrape. Ranger stepped in first. The room beyond was larger than he expected, built into the mountain itself. A hidden bunker. Old generators rusted along the left wall. Filing cabinets stood crooked and open. A desk in the far corner had collapsed under its own weight. Dust blanketed everything like snow. Cole whispered, "What the hell were you doing down here, Uncle Harold?" Ranger sniffed the ground, then moved with laser focus toward the right side of the room. Cole followed him to a stack of metal crates. Ranger nosed one hard, whining. Cole pried the lid open. Inside were folders wrapped in waterproof plastic. Dozens of them. Some stamped with property records for Silver Creek. Others marked with names he didn't recognize. A few stamped with the year 1971. Cole opened one. The documents were land surveys, maps of the ridges, transfer papers for properties, signatures forged so neatly a civilian wouldn't spot it. But Cole had learned to read deception in Afghanistan the way others read weather. This was organized, clean, calculated. He reached deeper into the crate and found a manila envelope labeled Dean. Inside, photographs of Sheriff Raymond Dean's father shaking hands with mining executives, receipts for unregistered land sales, a typed report alleging the disposal of evidence tied to missing persons cases. Cole's stomach tightened. Ranger poured another crate. Cole opened it. More files. One labeled H. Douglas, his uncle. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a detailed record Harold had written, pages describing the night he overheard two men in the woods behind the cabin. Plans to shut down an inquiry into stolen town land. A confrontation that turned violent. A threat that followed. Harold had been investigating the Deans, and they knew. Cole sat back, breath heavy. For years he had believed his family was small and scattered. Turns out one of them had died trying to expose corruption buried deeper than the mine shafts in these mountains. Ranger suddenly froze. He pressed his nose to a tarp in the corner, growling in a way Cole hadn't heard before. Not aggression, something colder, something mournful. Cole lifted the tarp. A bundle of old clothing lay beneath it. A dark wool sweater, gloves, and a hand-knitted scarf, stained deep brown. At first Cole thought it was dirt. Then he lifted it closer. Blood. Old, dried, almost black. But unmistakably blood. Ranger pushed his muzzle into the scarf, inhaling deeply. Then he looked up at Cole with an expression that was almost human. A recognition of tragedy. Cole whispered, "This belonged to him." The scarf smelled like cedar, like old books, like a man who lived alone too long. But beneath the decay was something else. Fear, the kind that stays in a place long after someone's last breath. Ranger looked toward the doorway and growled, not at the memory, at something real. Footsteps, slow, gravel shifting above the bunker, snow crunching. Someone was outside the cabin. Cole killed the flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed them, but Ranger stayed pressed to his leg, every muscle wired. The steps grew heavier, then the creak of the cabin's front door. Cole whispered, "Not now." Barely audible even to himself. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. Someone was inside the cabin, standing exactly above the hidden entrance. Ranger's body coiled like a spring. The footsteps moved. 1 step. 2. Right over the floorboard that concealed the tunnel. A pause. Cole tightened his grip on Ranger's collar. Then finally, the footsteps walked toward the front door. A click. A long creak. And the door shut. Cole waited another full minute until Ranger's ears lowered slightly. They climbed back up the tunnel quietly, emerging inside the cabin. The fire was still burning. Nothing looked disturbed, but the air felt wrong. Cole slowly approached the door and pulled it open. Sheriff Marcus Dean stood outside, snow collecting on his jacket. Evening, Henderson. Ranger growled low, stepping in front of Cole. Dean didn't flinch. Your lights were on. Thought I'd stop by. Make sure you weren't having trouble settling in. He smiled without warmth. That old place can make a man hear things. Cole studied him. You came in earlier. Dean raised a brow. You accusing me of something? You walked around my cabin. Dean's expression hardened. I walk around every property in town, but you? His eyes shifted past Cole into the cabin. You should be careful where you dig. Some parts of this mountain aren't stable. Ranger barked, sharply, lunging a half-step forward. Dean instinctively touched his holster. Cole placed a hand on Ranger's back. He doesn't like being lied to. Dean's jaw tightened. Snow fell around him in heavy flakes, but he didn't move. For a moment, the storm was quiet enough that Cole could hear the sheriff's breathing. Then Dean tipped his hat. Good night, Henderson, and keep that dog of yours on a leash. He turned and disappeared into the white. Cole shut the door with a long exhale. Ranger nudged the scarf in Cole's hand. You're right, Cole whispered. They killed him, and they think no one will ever know. But Ranger's unwavering stare said otherwise. The truth was awake now, and neither man nor mountain would bury it again. Snow hammered the mountains that night, a restless storm that swallowed the ridgeline and erased the stars. Cole had spent the entire evening pacing the cabin, replaying Sheriff Dean's warning in his mind. Ranger lay beside the wood stove, but his ears were sharp, twitching at every gust of wind. Something in the dog was on edge, and Cole trusted Ranger's instincts more than any feeling in his own chest. Cole kept returning to the items laid out on the table, the scarf, the forged land deeds, the photos implicating the Dean family, and the most dangerous thing of all, the rusted reel-to-reel tape from 1971. He hadn't listened to it yet, but Harold's handwritten note taped to the metal canister haunted him. If anything happens to me, this will explain why. Ranger lifted his head suddenly. A growl vibrated in the dog's chest, deep and warning. Cole froze. What do you hear? Ranger walked to the window and stared into the darkness. Only the storm glared back, swirling and violent. The cabin creaked. A distant thud echoed through the night. Not thunder, something closer. Cole grabbed his flashlight and shotgun, swept the beam outside. No movement, no tracks, nothing but the wind slicing through the pines. But Ranger didn't move from the window. He knew better. Cole clicked off the light. All right, partner, we stay alert. A sudden crack split the night. Glass exploded inward. A ball of fire slammed through the window and rolled under the table. Molotov. Cole dove toward Ranger. Move! The explosion hit before he landed. The entire wall lit up, flames racing along the floorboards faster than Cole could think. Heat dragged up the walls, eating into the wood like it had been waiting to burn. Ranger barked wildly, shoving Cole toward the back door with his body. Go! Go! Cole coughed, smoke already clawing at his lungs. He lunged for the evidence box, the only thing that mattered, and grabbed it under one arm. Ranger stayed glued to his side. A gunshot ripped through the doorway, splintering the frame. Cole hit the floor. Ranger spun, putting himself between Cole and the opening. Stay behind me, Cole whispered. But Ranger didn't listen. His instincts were older than fear, older than fire. The dog stepped forward, teeth bared, ready to fight whoever came through that door. Another shot fired. Ranger jerked, stumbling. A thin line of blood streaked across his side. No! Cole grabbed him, dragging the dog behind the overturned table for cover. Ranger whimpered softly, but still stared at the doorway, ready to stand again. Footsteps crunched outside, slow, confident. Cole recognized the rhythm, the weight. Sheriff Marcus Dean stepped into the burning cabin, gun raised. Flames lit his face from below, turning the falling snow behind him into a halo of embers, but his eyes were cold. Too cold for a man doing his job. This was personal. "You shouldn't have opened that tunnel, Henderson," Dean said. "Some things were buried for a reason." Cole held Ranger close, voice tight with fury. "You're covering your father's crimes." Dean smirked. "My father cleaned up the town. People went missing because they were threats. Your uncle was one of them." He stepped farther inside. "And now you are too." Cole tightened his grip on the shotgun, but kept it low. Fire cornered them, closing off every escape except the broken back door behind Dean. The sheriff noticed Cole's glance. "You won't make it through me." Ranger tried to stand again, even bleeding, even shaking. The dog pushed against Cole's arm, as if begging him to let go. Cole whispered, "Not yet. Stay with me. I've got you." Dean lifted the gun. Cole exhaled slowly. He aimed at the ceiling beam above Dean, not at the sheriff himself. Then he fired. The beam cracked, snapped in two, and crashed down. Dean stumbled backward into the doorway, pinned for a second under falling debris long enough for Cole to grab Ranger and sprint towards the kitchen exit. The fire roared behind them, louder, hungry. Cole shoved the back door open with his shoulder and plunged into the snow. The freezing air knifed his lungs. Ranger staggered beside him, leaving drops of red in the white snow. They ran into the forest, branches whipping around them, the storm swallowing everything except Ranger's labored panting. When Cole finally reached a fallen pine and dropped behind it, he cradled Ranger carefully. The dog's breathing was ragged, but his eyes stayed locked on Cole's face. "You saved my life," Cole whispered, voice breaking despite everything he'd learned to bury. Ranger pressed his muzzle into Cole's hand, as if saying he'd do it again. A shuttle of light swept across the forest behind them. Flashlight beams, men shouting, Dean's voice rising above the storm. "Find them! They have the tape!" Cole pressed the evidence box tight to his chest. Ranger rested his head against Cole's knee, eyes sharp despite the pain. They were no longer running from a mystery. They were running from the men who created it. And the storm wasn't the only thing hunting them now. The world was a blur of snow and adrenaline as Cole carried Ranger through the side streets of Silver Creek, ducking beneath the glare of porch lights and drifting smoke from the burning cabin behind them. Ranger trembled in his arms, breath shallow but steady. The dog was bleeding, but he was conscious, and that was enough to push Cole forward. Laura's store sat on the edge of town, its windows dark. Cole knocked once, twice. Nothing. He knocked a third time, louder. The door jerked open. Laura McKinley stood there in her flannel shirt and winter boots, eyes widening as she saw the blood on Cole's jacket. "Get in, quickly." Cole stepped inside. Warmth hit him instantly. Laura locked the door behind them and guided him to the back room where she kept emergency supplies. Ranger lay on the blanket she spread out, panting, ribs shifting shallowly. Laura knelt beside him. "Bullet graze. Deep enough to tear muscle. Lucky enough to miss anything vital." She glanced up at Cole. "What happened?" "They tried to kill us," Cole said, voice tight. "Dean and others out there in the woods." Laura's mouth tightened. "I knew something would happen once you opened that cabin." She cleaned Ranger's wound with practiced hands. The dog didn't fight her. He watched Cole the entire time, eyes sharp despite the pain. Cole kept a palm on Ranger's neck, grounding both of them. "He saved my life," Cole murmured. Laura nodded softly. "Dogs have a way of knowing who deserves to stay alive." She wrapped Ranger's torso with gauze, her hand steady even as the storm outside pounded the windows. "He'll make it, but he needs rest." Cole exhaled shakily. Relief came with guilt. Ranger had taken the bullet meant for him. Laura rose and motioned for him to follow her to the back office. She opened a dusty cabinet and pulled out a box, wrapped in layers of cloth and tied with a faded leather strap. "My father left this," she said. "Told me not to open it unless the past came for Silver Creek again." She set the box on the table. "And I think today qualifies." Cole untied the strap, lifted the lid. Inside was a metal canister identical to the one from the underground bunker. On top of it lay a handwritten note. "For Harold Douglas, if he doesn't make it, for whoever finds the truth he tried to save." Cole's chest hollowed. Laura's voice went soft. "My dad and your uncle were partners, before the sheriff at the time shut them down." Cole opened the canister. The reel-to-reel tape was pristine, preserved, protected, not rusted like the one he found in the bunker. Laura pulled out an old tape player from beneath a stack of ledgers. "It still works." Cole threaded the tape. His hands shook slightly, but not from fear. It was the weight of a man he never met. Family, blood. He hit play. Static at first, then a breath, a man clearing his throat. Then the voice came, older, steady, worn from years of work. "Harold Douglas. If you're hearing this, then I didn't make it back from the ridge. I followed Sheriff Dean Sr. and 2 others into the timberline. They were carrying something wrapped in canvas. A body. Young. Maybe a hiker. Maybe someone who got too close to their land deals." Cole closed his eyes. Harold continued. "They buried the body under the old mining road. They talked about covering up forged property deeds, selling federal land to private contractors. They said the town would never know, that no one would ever dig deep enough." Ranger whimpered from the other room, as if he recognized the truth in the man's voice. Harold's tone shifted. More urgent. "If anything happens to me, they will come after anyone who asks questions. They already threatened me once. I'm leaving the originals in the bunker. If they find them, there's a copy here, and they cannot escape both." Laura clasped her hands, knuckles white. This is enough to bring down the entire Dean family." Cole rewound the tape, staring at the player as if it might speak again. "It's enough to burn half this town clean." "You can't go to Dean," Laura said. "He'll kill you the second you try." "I'm not going to Dean." Cole stood. His voice was calm, but carved with steel. "I'm going to the state police." Laura stepped back, fear flickering in her eyes. "Cole, he will come after you. And after Ranger. You know that." Cole glanced toward the back room where Ranger lay, watching them with unwavering loyalty. "I know," Cole said. "But if I run, Harold died for nothing." Laura swallowed. "Then you'll need help, and a plan." Cole picked up the evidence box. Inside, the tape glinted faintly in the lamplight. "Help doesn't matter. Backup doesn't matter. What matters is that this doesn't stay buried another 50 years. He walked to Ranger, knelt, and stroked the dog's head gently. "You saved my life tonight. Now I need you again. But not to fight." Ranger pressed his forehead against Cole's arm as if answering. Cole's voice lowered to a whisper. "We're going to bring them down. Both of us." Outside, the storm kept raging, but something shifted in the world around them, like the mountain itself was waking up, like the forest was done keeping secrets. Justice was stirring, and Silver Creek was about to feel it. Winter returned to Silver Creek almost exactly the way it had the year before, with the same heavy snow sliding down the mountains and the same wind curling around the ridge like an old ghost. But the town was different now. The silence carried less fear, the shadows seemed thinner, and for the first time in decades, people walked Main Street with their shoulders a little straighter. News trucks had come and gone months ago. Court hearings had stretched through the summer. The town had watched every moment on local broadcasts. Sheriff Marcus Dean in handcuffs, his face hollow as the charges were read. Conspiracy, evidence tampering, homicide connected to the 1971 disappearance. The sins buried beneath the mountain finally clawed their way into daylight. And it started with a dog digging under an old cabin. Cole stood on the porch of that same cabin now, though it looked nothing like the place he first arrived in. The burned walls were rebuilt, the foundation reinforced, the dark tunnel sealed for good. Fresh cedar siding lined the exterior, and warm light glowed from inside. A new sign hung near the steps: Silver Creek Veterans Haven Rest. Heal, begin again. He never planned to start something like this, but the town needed it. Maybe he did too. Behind him, Ranger stepped outside with the slow, deliberate walk of a survivor. The fur along his ribs still grew uneven where the bullet grazed him. He was older now, white speckles around his muzzle, a deeper calm in his eyes, but he carried himself like nothing in the world could break him. Cole crouched beside him. "Cold out here for you, old man." Ranger gave a soft grunt, pressed his head into Cole's shoulder, and stared out at the valley as if making sure it was still safe. Cole followed his gaze. A group of volunteers was clearing a new walking path below, veterans from every corner of the state who came to Silver Creek because someone else had been brave enough to start over here first. A truck rumbled up the drive. Snow kicked up behind it. Laura stepped out carrying 2 boxes of donated supplies. "You working or staring at the view again?" she called. "Bit of both," Cole said, taking the boxes from her. "You know," she said, glancing around. "My dad would be proud. He always told me the mountain needed people who weren't afraid of the truth." Cole nodded quietly. "He saved more lives than anyone ever knew. And so did you," she said. But Cole shook his head. "Ranger saved me. I just followed where he led." Ranger trotted forward as if understanding his name had been mentioned, tail swaying gently. Laura knelt to scratch behind his ears. "He looks good," she said softly. "He took a hell of a hit," Cole said. "Didn't slow him down." Laura smiled. "Some dogs are born fighters." Then her expression softened. "Sometimes I think he knew the truth was bigger than all of us." Cole looked at Ranger, not at his scars, not at his age, but at the strength in him. That quiet, steady willingness to stand between danger and the person he loved. "He did," Cole said. "He always did." A gust of wind rushed across the ridge, scattering snow along the porch. Ranger lifted his head toward it, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then a young man stepped out from the cabin, Cole's newest arrival, a Marine who hadn't slept through a full night in years. He stood hesitantly with a mug of coffee, watching Cole the way someone watches a stranger they want to trust, but aren't sure how. "Mr. Henderson," the young man said, voice rough. "You need help with the trail markers?" "Just Cole," he replied. "And sure, we'll do it together later." The young man nodded and disappeared inside, closing the door gently behind him. Laura touched Cole's arm. "They're healing because you made space for them too." "I just gave them a roof," Cole said. "No," she said. "You gave them a place where their ghosts don't have to win." Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the truth was simple. He understood those ghosts. He had walked through the same darkness they were trying to escape. Ranger nudged his hand again. Cole rubbed his ear. "You ready for another year of this?" he asked. Ranger gave a short bark, the same confident sound he made that night under the burning cabin roof. It echoed across the valley, rolling through the pines like a promise the mountain was willing to keep this time. Snow continued to fall, softer now, gentler. Not like a warning, but like a blanket laid over wounds that had finally started to close. The storm had passed, and what remained, Cole, Ranger, and the people gathering at Silver Creek Veterans Haven, was stronger than anything buried beneath the mountain. The morning sun spilled over Silver Creek with a soft winter gold glow, brushing the snowbanks and the rebuilt cabin with warmth that felt almost symbolic. Cole stood on the porch of the Veterans Haven, sipping coffee from a metal mug, while Ranger lay stretched at his feet, chin resting on his paws. His fur had thickened for the season, the white around his muzzle a little more pronounced than last year, but his eyes were alert, watchful, proud. A van wound its way up the gravel path, tires crunching over frozen earth. Cole raised a brow. Laura stepped out first. Behind her spilled a group of teenagers bundled in scarves and winter coats, each carrying notepads, cameras, or recorders. Excitement lit their faces as they hurried forward. Cole blinked. Field trip? Laura laughed. Civics project. They're covering historic cases across the state. And, well, your story is now one of them. Ranger pushed himself upright, tail sweeping across the porch. The kids froze for a second, awe flashing in their expressions. That's him, one whispered. That's Ranger. Another girl said, the dog who found the 50-year-old cold case. My mom cried reading that article. Cole rubbed Ranger's neck. He likes attention. Just go slow with him. The group gathered near the porch steps. A boy with thick glasses raised his hand with the seriousness of a young reporter. Mr. Henderson, could you tell us how it all started? Cole hesitated. Every time he told the story, he felt the weight of it. The fire, the snow, the bunker, Harold's voice on the tape, Ranger bleeding in his arms. But he also felt something else, the way truth survived, even when buried, the way one dog refused to let injustice stay hidden. He nodded. Sure, but you should know. None of this would have happened without Ranger. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of his name, ears perked. Cole led the students inside to a small gathering room lined with photographs. Veterans rebuilding their lives, community events. And in the corner, a framed picture of the old cabin before the fire. Beneath it, a photo of Ranger the night he arrived in Silver Creek, snow covering his snout as he stared into the storm. Cole began where it always began. The unexpected inheritance. I came here thinking I was just cleaning out an old cabin. I didn't know anything about my uncle. Didn't know he'd been investigating corruption that reached deep into this town. I didn't even know he was dead. A girl raised her hand. When did you realize something was wrong? When Ranger started digging, Cole said. He kept pacing, growling at the floorboards. Finally, he clawed up the old wood and uncovered a metal box. That was the first sign something about Silver Creek wasn't right. The students leaned in. Inside were maps, a badge fragment, and a rusted tape. Then Ranger uncovered the tunnel under the cabin itself. That changed everything. The boy with the glasses spoke again. Did you think someone would come after you? Cole's gaze drifted to the fireplace. Not at first. Not until I learned who Sheriff Dean really was. The room fell silent. Ranger lifted his head as if remembering the man's scent. Cole continued. His father was behind the missing persons case in 1971. He buried evidence, threatened anyone who got close. My uncle got too close. And the sheriff today? He spent his whole life protecting that secret. A girl murmured, But you exposed him. Cole shook his head. Ranger exposed him. He found the tunnel. He found the scarf. And he took a bullet to protect me. If he hadn't pushed me out of the way, I'd be the one in the ground. Several students glanced at Ranger with a new kind of reverence. But the most important thing, Cole added, was what we found with Laura, the second tape. That was the truth my uncle died trying to preserve. And once that came out, Silver Creek finally woke up. Laura, listening from the doorway, smiled faintly. The students scribbled frantically, a few wiping at their eyes. "Mr. Henderson," one of the quieter boys said, "what made you stay? After everything that happened? Why rebuild the cabin instead of leaving?" Cole looked down at Ranger. The dog had wandered over to sniff one of the students' jackets gently, tail swaying. He seemed content, settled, as if he knew the world he fought to save had finally steadied beneath him. "Because this place changed me," Cole said. "I came here broken. Ranger kept me alive long enough to face things I'd been running from. This cabin became something new. A home. A chance for others to heal." Another student raised her camera. "Can he sit for a portrait?" Ranger heard the click of the lens and sat before she even asked. Regal, quiet, still carrying the posture of a dog who had stood between justice and death. The students lined up beside him, laughing as Ranger leaned into their hands or nudged them with his nose. After they left, Laura lingered on the porch. "You know the headline that's everywhere?" she said. Cole smirked. "The one that makes me sound like some kind of hero?" "No," Laura said. "The one about him." She handed Cole her phone. The article read, "Colorado's Hidden Truth. Loyal Shepherd uncovers 50-year cover-up. The dog who refused to let the mountain keep its secrets below it." A picture of Ranger standing in the snow, framed by pine trees. Cole exhaled slowly. He deserves that. Ranger nudged Cole's leg, then leaned against him with quiet certainty. Laura smiled. "His legacy isn't just solving a case. It's every veteran who walks through your door because they heard this story, because they believe healing is possible." Cole looked over the valley, where the sun dipped lower, turning the snowfields into silver. "His legacy," Cole said softly, "isn't finished yet." Ranger lifted his head at the wind, eyes bright, posture alert, as if sensing there were still things worth protecting, still truths worth finding, and still lives worth saving. The sky above Silver Creek was the clearest it had been in months. A pale blue stretched over the mountains, clean and unbroken, as if the town itself had taken its first deep breath after half a century of holding it in. Cars lined the gravel drive leading to the newly finished Veterans Haven, their tires crackling over frost-covered earth. Families stepped out carrying casseroles, blankets, flowers. Veterans in worn jackets walked slowly, taking in the sight of a cabin that had once been nothing but a smoldering ruin. Cole stood on the porch, adjusting the collar of his flannel shirt. He wasn't used to crowds or cameras, but today wasn't about him. Today was about something bigger, something reclaimed, something earned. Beside him, Ranger sat straight and steady, chest puffed out, tail brushing the boards with a quiet rhythm. His fur caught the sunlight like rough-cut gold. More people recognized him than recognized Cole, and Ranger accepted every hand that reached to pat him with polite dignity. When the ribbon-cutting began, a wave of reporters approached. Microphones extended like metal branches. Questions flew about the case, the bunker, the trial, the legacy of the Dean family. Cole answered what he could, skipped what was better left to the courts, and kept his tone even. But then a younger reporter stepped forward. She wasn't aggressive like the others. She held her microphone carefully, almost respectfully. "Mr. Henderson," she asked, "through everything you went through, the fire, the investigation, the threats, why did you keep Ranger by your side? Why put him through all that? Danger?" The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ranger looked up at Cole, ears forward as if he too wanted to hear the answer. Cole rested a hand on Ranger's head. "He didn't just find the evidence," Cole said softly. "He found the part of me I thought was gone. And somehow, he saved me too. A ripple went through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, some nodded. The veteran standing near the porch understood better than most. Cole straightened, looked into the camera the reporter raised toward him. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" The question hung in the cold morning air. It was more than a line for the evening news. It was an invitation for everyone who ever leaned on a dog to make it through one more day. The reporter stepped back, clearly moved. Others continued shouting questions, but Cole didn't answer them. He stepped off the porch, letting Ranger lead him through the small gathering of former soldiers and families. Every so often, Ranger stopped to greet someone: a man with a prosthetic leg, a woman with a trembling voice, a teenage girl wearing a gold star pin. Ranger paused, with each like he understood exactly what they carried. Children followed behind him like a trail of bright colors in the snow. Laura joined Cole near the tree line. "You handled that well," she said. "I just told the truth." "People can feel that," she replied. "That's why this place is going to matter." They looked out over the clearing where volunteers were already building the meditation hut and the dog training field Veterans Haven would soon offer. The sound of hammers, laughter, and quiet conversations blended together into something the mountain hadn't heard in decades. Life without fear. Cole felt Ranger press against his leg. The dog lifted his head toward the forest. Not tense, not alarmed, just listening. Like the woods were whispering one last secret before winter settled in. "What is it, boy?" Cole murmured. Ranger stared into the tree line, eyes bright and unreadable. Then he gave a single quiet bark and trotted a few steps forward, snow scattering under his paws. Cole followed slowly, stopping beside him at the edge of the pines. No danger waited there. No enemy. No buried truth. Only a curtain of trees swaying gently, as if the whole forest was breathing again. "Looks like he's not done," Laura said from behind them. "Maybe he never will be." Cole smiled. "Good. Silver Creek needs someone watching its back." Ranger's tail swept the snow, slow and steady. He turned from the trees and nudged Cole's hand, as if telling him the past was finished now. The future was theirs. Guests began clapping behind them, calling for Cole to join the ceremony. Ranger trotted back towards the crowd, pausing once to look over his shoulder, as if to say he'd be ready when the next truth called. Cole followed, heart steady, breath warm in the winter air. The camera crews packed up. The volunteers cheered. Children hugged Ranger like he was a living legend. And in a way he was. Because one dog, one loyal, unbreakable dog, had changed an entire mountain town. And his story wasn't ending. Not here, not today, not ever. Cole stepped onto the porch again, placed a hand over Ranger's back, and turned to the audience of visitors, neighbors, and new supporters gathering around the haven. "If this story touched you," he said, voice strong and sure, "support the mission, support veterans, support the dogs who stand with them, and if you love German shepherds as much as I do, stick with us. This is just the beginning." Ranger barked once, loud, proud, echoing off the pines. An ending, a beginning, a legacy passed on through snow, truth, and one loyal heart.